This is Talking Foreign Policy, a critical look at Canada's role abroad. I'm Yves Engler. Recently, a peace caravan has launched. The On to Ottawa peace caravan launched from Vancouver and will be arriving in Ottawa on May 28th, alongside a caravan coming from the East Coast. To talk about this, we have Canadian Foreign Policy Institute board member, Tamara Lorincz, and a longtime peace and justice activist in Canada. First of all, can you just give us a breakdown of what this caravan is, and then I guess a bit about what it's challenging?
Yes, thank you for having me on, Yves. So the On to Ottawa Peace Caravan is an initiative that was launched by the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom Canada and the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace. And it's being endorsed and supported by all of the peace groups in Canada, including the Canada-wide Peace and Justice Network, that umbrella organization of the peace and anti-war groups in the country. And the inspiration for this On to Ottawa Peace Caravan is that some of the older women in our two women's peace groups, they participated in women's caravans for gender equality and also for abortion rights in the 1970s and the 1980s. And they are very worried about the rearmament that they're seeing in Canada, the rise of military spending and militarism, and the wars that are happening in the world. Very concerned about the genocide that's taking place in Gaza. And they are wanting to launch this peace caravan to bring the message to Ottawa that we want our government to take peace seriously and to center peace in our foreign policy and to give a budget to peace. So the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom Canada, WILP, they launched their caravan from Vancouver on Mother's Day, Sunday, May 12th. And because Mother's Day is also Peace Day originally, and so they have been crossing very slowly from Vancouver to Ottawa, and they're stopping at a whole bunch of cities along the way to interact with local communities and peace groups and concerned citizens there, to collect signatures on petitions, to pass out resources. They have some really great handouts and resources that they're distributing, and talk about this urgent need for peace and why Canadians need to get more active and to put pressure on elected officials to stop investing in militarism and to start supporting peace. And so they, for instance, stopped in Kelowna and Calgary and Regina and Winnipeg and Thunder Bay and many other communities that I haven't mentioned, but the schedule is up on the WILP Canada website. It's just wilpcanada.ca. So they are on their way, and they're going to be stopping this week, for instance, in London, Ontario, in Kitchener, Waterloo, and also Toronto on Saturday. Now, on May 25th, there's going to be another caravan that is leaving Halifax, and this is an initiative led by the Nova Scotia Voice of Women chapter, and they're going to be stopping at communities along the way, for instance, Fredericton and Montreal, and again, having events. And they're also going to be promoting this, peace buttons, and they've done some really great art for peace that they're going to be sharing and promoting to the communities that they're speaking to. But we are all going to converge and meet on Monday, May 27th in Ottawa, because that's when we're going to be having a really big teach-in at the Bronson Centre. It's going to go from 4:30 until 10 p.m. And then on Tuesday, May 28th, we're having a peace rally on Parliament Hill. And then in the evening, we are going to be joining with the activists that are planning the big CANSEC protest. And that's the arms show, the arms fair that's taking place. And so we are meeting in the capital because we are bringing our message to Parliament that we want peace, but also to help support the big protest of the arms fair that's taking place that week as well.
And yeah, and so can you just tell us a little bit about before we get to the defense policy update, the CANSEC and what that is, and that there's been annual demonstrations around that for I think for decades now.
Yeah, for over 30 years, Canada has been hosting the largest arms fair in North America. It's called CANSEC, and this year it's taking place at the EY Center just outside of Ottawa, close to the airport. And it's going to be on May 29th and May 30th. So it's a 2-day arms fair, and there are about 10,000 to 13,000 delegates from around the world, from all of the big weapons manufacturers. They come and display their weapons. And so you've got representatives from Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, from L3 Harris, from Teledyne, from Colt, and then you have also companies like the Israeli weapons manufacturer Elbit Systems. You have BAE from the United Kingdom. You have the French arms manufacturers all across Europe. All of the big weapons manufacturers come to CANSEC, and they have this 2-day event where they're interacting with the Canadian military, with the Canadian officials in the Department of National Defense and Procurement. There's also the big event opens with a speech from our Minister of Defense, and that's in the morning of May 29th. And that's when all of the peace activists are going to be trying to shut down the streets and there's gates now around the EY Center because of the protests that we have been having every year. And so there are very small spaces for delegates to come in to the venue. But this is where we try with our banners and with our presence to try to slow down people and prevent them from entering, and then also trying to prevent the cars coming into the venue. So this is a really big effort. We've had hundreds of people to try to help us shut down CANSEC. We need hundreds of more people to help shut this down. All of these weapons that are being procured and traded are used to injure and kill people in other countries. We see that now taking place in Gaza. We see this in Ukraine and in other countries. And so if Canadians want to stop our economy from being a kind of a highly militarized economy that's based on arms exports into a green care peace economy, we need you to show up in Ottawa and to help us shut down CANSEC. The federal government is spending so much money in supporting CANSEC. People also need to know that CANSEC is run by the big arms lobby in this country. It's called CADSE, the Canadian Aerospace and Defense and Securities Industry, CADSE. And so all of the branch plants, the subsidiaries of the big American and European weapons manufacturers are part of this CADSE lobby, as well as it would be interesting for people to know, it's very troubling that many universities have representatives in CADSE. So, for instance, the University of Waterloo, UBC, and many of the colleges, Fanshawe, Seneca, etc., they have representatives that are part of CADSE because they're trying to do military and weapons research, in the engineering and computer science, for instance, faculties, and they're trying to get their students, into these companies. And so this is why, for instance, the student protests that we're seeing at the universities are so important, calling for divestment. And this is the message of divestment that we're also bringing to CANSEC and to CADSE. We want Canada and we want our universities to stop investing in weapons manufacturing and an arms industry, and to start investing in a green economy that we desperately need because we're facing catastrophic climate change. That's our real security challenge.
Yeah, and that gets to the big picture. You published a piece in the Hamilton Spectator and a couple of places titled "New Defense Update: and federal budget recklessly put Canada on a war path. And so the government released a new defense policy about a month ago or so, and it's further militarizing an already, I think what we would both agree is an already over-militarized political sphere, economic sphere. Can you just give us a little bit of an update on the defense policy statement, which just continues along a pathway that, of course, the F-35, massive F-35 purchase, an even bigger surface combat naval vessel purchase, which is now they're talking about as much as $100 billion up front, and then 300 billion over the life cycle, or even more than that. But yeah, can you just give us a little bit about the defense policy update?
Yes. So on April 8th at the Trenton military base, our Prime Minister and our Defense Minister announced the defense policy update called Our North Strong and Free, a renewed vision for Canada's defense. And it is a massive investment in militarization and rearmament. So it's like a 7-year update to Canada's 2017 defense policy, which was called Strong, Secure, and Engaged. In this 9 years that we've had this Liberal government, there have been 2 defense policies. We've never had a foreign policy update, but we've had 2 defense policies, and in both cases the federal government has announced massive diversion of public funds into the Department of National Defense, into militarism. And the reason why is to meet these so-called commitments that we have to NORAD and to NATO, and also because of our close defense partnership with the United States. And if you follow closely statements that are made by US officials, they've been pushing for years Canada to increase military spending to meet the 2% NATO target. So if you look at this new defense policy update, this is what Canada is attempting to do, to increase our military spending, but also to increase our weapons purchases, to meet these military obligations that we have to NATO and NORAD. So under the defense policy update, our military spending for the Department of National Defense is going to increase from $33 billion annually to $50 billion by 2030. And we are going to increase GDP spending for the military from 1.3% to 1.76% as we try to move to this 2% NATO target. And the investment that we're making it is for new weapons weapons purchases. So we are they talked about 88 new F-35s and a new tactical $19 billion for new tactical helicopters. $10 billion for these anti-submarine Poseidon tactical aircraft, and $5 billion for armed drones, more funding for new tanks and surface-to-air missile systems, radar systems, and armored vehicles, and more investment for recruitment. So this is really hyper-militarization, and it's coming at a time where we need to rapidly decarbonize, to try to avert catastrophic climate change. Most of this investment in the new defense policy update is fossil fuel powered, requires a huge steady supplies of petroleum products, and it's also going to mean a vast militarization of our Arctic, which is the fastest warming region of the country. So Canadians should be very concerned that we are spending all of this public funds for this militarization in weapon systems that are going to exacerbate the climate crisis, and they are also going to exacerbate immiseration, poverty in this country. And so Canadians should be outraged, and they should be putting pressure on their elected officials to say no. What's extremely troubling is that there was no political opposition at all to the defense policy update. I followed carefully the statements that were coming from the NDP, from the Greens. At the time the defense policy update came out on April 8th, a week later was our federal budget that just gave more detail about how we're going to be spending all of these public funds on militarism. And again, a week later, when our federal budget came out, and you could see all of this military spending, there was no public opposition at all expressed by any political official, any elected official. No one has spoken out against all of this defense spending and weapons purchases.
Would be a lot of social housing that could be built, maybe car-free social housing in centers of cities, so we could both get many of the unhoused people a place to live and move away from the private automobile, but instead we want to be buying more weapons. Thanks a lot for coming on, talking foreign policy, and we'll obviously keep an eye on this issue going forward.
Thanks very much, Eve, for having me. And people can find out more at wilpcanada.ca.